Chapter 7 Sickness and Health. The 13th of February 2019, 3:15 p.m. Back home. I've had much to think about on the drive back, but the overriding question I keep asking myself is, where do I go from here? I'm still in shock, I don't mind admitting. Mr. Frankenberg was brutally honest, equally so in part 2 of the interview. I will reproduce the rest in the next few pages, and then try to make a plan. Tomorrow I'll write to Mr. Green with my findings to see which direction he wants me to go next. The cost to him could be considerable if he wants to find out more. At least now I feel I'm making progress of sorts. Part 2 of the interview. I asked Daniel, why would he take your identity? What did he have to gain by doing that? What happened to him? Do you know where he is? Is he still alive? I was like a machine gun firing out questions like bullets. Perhaps not the best simile for Daniel, but it was an accurate one. He replied, "So many questions, Paul. I know you must have so many, and I will try and answer them all honestly. But I need to take you through the chain of events that brought me to England. I will tell you all I know about Ernie, I promise. Hopefully it will give you enough to go on the next stage of your investigation." Again, I was happy with this. It was clear that he trusted my intentions were honourable. But then what did he have to lose? As he said, "I'm an old man now, Paul. If you choose to report me to the authorities, you are within your rights to do so. I don't suppose it matters now at my age, but I admit I do not regret this. Whatever they choose to do, it will be nothing compared to what my family went through in Germany. I feel so much better for having talked to someone about it. Everything I've told you is the truth, and everything I tell you now is the truth, to the best of my memory. I hope it helps, and I really hope you can find out what happened to Ernie." I assured him that everything he told me would remain confidential. I assured him that I protect my sources of information. He seemed pleased to hear this. He went on. "When I met Ernie for the first time, I was only 18. He was a year younger than me. We struck up a friendship almost straight away. We shared a similar sense of humour. I had almost forgotten what it was like to laugh and joke, but not with Ernie. His sense of fun was infectious. There we were, in the middle of this hell on earth, surrounded by reminders of the most inhumane period of human history, and he provided a chink of light in all this darkness. In all that misery and sadness, he brought a smile to so many faces, no more so than mine. I was still working and volunteering with the Red Cross, and that summer of 1947 the British brought in a number of new recruits to help out. Most were young volunteers rather than medical staff, and Ernie was one of them. He had signed up back in England and requested a posting in Germany to support the charity and the army in one of its most challenging hospitals. I wouldn't imagine they would consider such a request these days, but they were different times back then, and any experienced hand was welcome. Ernie was first aid trained, and had been a volunteer with the Red Cross ever since his own illness, but I'll tell you more about that shortly. I asked him, what did Ernie's parents make of this? Were they happy to let him go? It must have been a huge wrench for them. From what he told me, they weren't happy, but they understood. The war was over, but it was still a dangerous place to be. To a large extent, though, they wouldn't know that. The media coverage was not as thorough back then. None of this internet or worldwide whatever nonsense. They would have been reliant on letters and newspaper reports and the occasional programme on the wireless. I wouldn't imagine that they'd read or hear anything about what was going on in Germany, here in West Cumbria. I doubt David and Mabel knew much about what it was like there, even 2 years after the war had come to an end. Ernie did, though. He told me. He studied every newspaper report and listened to every news broadcast. He read books, journals, and press releases. He wrote to the regiments that liberated the camp. He read testimonies from the soldiers and the survivors of the camp. He studied the history of the conflict and the geography of countries involved. He met with medical staff who had served in Germany during the war. During his teenage years, he had plenty of time on his hands, but he used it to good effect. He told me of his fascination with the conflict and how he could simply not understand man's inhumanity to man, and he wanted, in his own small way, to help. He didn't want to sit at home. He wanted to be there, and when the Red Cross offered him the opportunity to work at Bergen-Belsen, he jumped at the chance. I doubt his parents could have stopped him if they tried. They would play their part going forward, but they didn't know this at that time. By this point, having worked with the British for nearly 2 years, my English was excellent, and it became my first language. I would spend most of the day in the complex conversing with people who could only speak English, so as you can imagine, I was quite taken aback when I found that Ernie was proficient in German. He was mainly self-taught, although he had taken some private tuition, ironically from a German prisoner of war who was based in Cumbria, who went on to settle in the town of Cockermouth. Ernie had met him at the local library there and had struck up an unlikely friendship. I say unlikely. Ernie could befriend anyone. He would never judge. He never failed to surprise or amaze me. Some of his pronunciation was shaky, and occasionally the word order was a struggle for him, but in the main we would converse well in both English and German. He wanted me to teach him and correct him when he made mistakes. He was so keen to learn. It was fun, refreshing even. I actually felt useful and wanted. We spent so much time together. Our nickname in the camp was the Twins. We had so much in common. I never really had a friend before, not like this. I could talk with him, and laugh and cry and mess about. I trusted him. It felt so good. We lived similar early lives. We both had loving parents and we were both happy growing up. Different countries, but similar lives. We looked alike too. Same height, same colour hair, same build. We were both slight and slim, the result of our past illnesses, I suppose. Like I say, Ernie had such a good sense of humour. Everyone liked him, especially the girls. Neither of us were what I would consider good looking, but that didn't seem to matter. He could charm the birds out of the trees. There was no arrogance about him. It was all very natural. He courted a few different girls on the camp, but he was a bit unfortunate on that score, as on at least 3 occasions, just as he felt he'd met the right one, and they were getting along so nicely, the girls were posted elsewhere, and that was that. Personally, I didn't have the same confidence with the ladies as Ernie. I did have a few dates, and our double dates were legendary. We would spend whole evenings in stitches. The laughter was such a tonic. After all I'd been through, I never imagined I would laugh and joke, but Ernie changed all that for me. He wasn't daft, though. He knew when to joke and when to be serious. This displaced persons camp was definitely a place to be serious, and within a month or two of him being in Germany, he asked me if he could help there, and could I make the necessary introductions. The fact that he could converse in German certainly went in his favour, and very soon we were working at both the Red Cross Hospital and the DPC together. And what an impression he made there as well. Attitudes do not fade overnight, and Germany was still a very hostile environment for any Jew. Even after all that had happened, many Germans still blamed us, and remarkably, Hitler still had a huge following in the country. The Germans had been beaten, and the people were both angry, scared, and suspicious. They had no idea what their own future held, and people always looked to blame others and try and find a scapegoat or a target for their anger. It was a small town with narrow-minded people, even 2 years on from the war. The DPC was often targeted by gangs, spouting their hatred and bile. Many Jews were attacked and beaten. It was not safe to walk the streets at night or alone. The police were not interested. They would turn a blind eye to such assaults. Some Jews even received death threats. It was not a safe place to be. Ernie was aware of this mood, though, and he was very protective of the Jewish community, and not just the Jews, any minority group. Physically, he was no match for the thugs, but he didn't need to be. He seemed to sense danger, and as such, help to avert or avoid it. He was careful, not so much for himself, but for those in his care. He would walk people home if they were frightened. He would plan safe routes to walk or help people with their shopping or bill paying if it saved them from any confrontation or a potentially threatening situation. The community liked him, trusted him, even needed him. He never asked for anything in return. He appreciated life and the lives of those he cared for.